With the most critical presidential election of our time rapidly approaching, we'll take a deep dive into the state of Black progress with Star Parker on this episode of United Patriots Uprising with Gary Binford. I'm your host, Gary Binford. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. The video version you can find at Rumble, YouTube, and Conservative Television of America. Either way, hope you subscribe to it. Leave a rating, hit the notification button so you'll be notified when it comes out, and please tell your friends about the show. Star Parker has been a favorite person of mine for many, many years now. I first heard of her back in 2013. She was a guest on Dr. James Dobson's show, Focus on the Family, talking about the plight of Black America, how the family had been broken by what she called, in her book, Uncle Sam's Plantation, the welfare state, and how it had destroyed Black America. Since then, she's been a beacon of conservatism and has worked diligently to try and get more Black people to understand conservatism is the only way you can go. It's been kind of hard because 90% of Blacks still vote for Democrats. Oh boy. Well, let's find out if times are changing. Let's see how much Black progress is being made. Are you ready? Well, let's get into it. My guest is the author of several books and a regular commentator on national television and radio networks. She's a nationally syndicated columnist and the host of her own weekly television show, Pure America with Star Parker. I welcome back to the show the founder and president of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, Star Parker. Star, how are you?
I'm good. It's so good to be back with you.
And it's good to see you again. And it's been quite a while. The last time I talked to you was about a month before January 6, 2020, and a whole lot has changed since then. Yeah. Right now, Cure, you have a book, and you're talking about the progress of Black America or the state of Black America. Tell people about the book, the name of the book, and I hope we have a better report than we had in 2020.
Well, we do. Actually, it's a tome, The State of Black Progress. It's not called The State of Black America anymore because the Urban League did come after us using that title, sent us a cease and desist letter saying we couldn't use that name, even though they didn't trademark it. And a lot of people wonder about the state of Black America. We thought it appropriate to not fight them in court and just rename the state of Black progress, because when you think about America, it actually has worked very well for African Americans. More Black Americans are in the great middle class and above than are in those pockets of poverty that we're still all concerned about. So the state of Black progress is okay.
Okay. Black progress. Is Black progress going to show itself at the polls in 2024?
Well,
still,
of course,
we, you and I both, we have lived through this. I first heard of you back when you were on Dr. James Dobson's show back in 2013, and Blacks were still voting 90% Democrat. I thought that would change. It hasn't. So is the state of Black progress, is that going to be part of it this time around?
Well, we'll see, because, in this particular tome, we're looking at 4 pulse points that we should be really concerned about when we think about the 8,700 broken zip codes, to where the left has concentrated poverty and broken down everything from family life to education life to health life to economic stability by trying to control all economic interests through their Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, HUD, and all the other departments here in Washington. So there are challenges to why we don't see a record number of African Americans move their vote to be consistent with their values and the economic opportunities in front of them. The great challenge for us is that coming out of the civil rights era, more Blacks went to work for government. And so we have a disproportionate number of Blacks that get their income from government. So they're not going to be so open to vote for the party that wants to limit the size and scope of government. However, much is changing, as we are seeing in the polls, as you and I know firsthand by just talking talking to our families that much is changing in Black communities, especially with young Black men. Young Black men are much more entrepreneurial. The majority of them have grown up in middle class families. 40% of Blacks live in the suburbs, so their interests have changed. They can't be bought, in this basket of collectivism anymore. Their interests are very different. They're concerned about the economy. They're concerned about inflation. They're concerned about illegal immigration. They want safe communities. And they want their schools to not have all this transing stuff involved in their educational opportunities when you live in the suburbs. So that means that their values are the same as all their neighbors' values. So their interests are different and they may vote differently. Why do I say may vote differently? Well, one reason, they're two generations away from the Civil Rights Act. Even though there's an appreciation of civil rights movement, we're talking about it not touching their personal life. Even their grandparents' lives were not involved in Jim Crow. So while they give reference to that particular era, it's not their life experiences. So they want more freedom in their own lives to do a whole lot of new things. And that means taking a look at what the Republicans have to offer. We are starting to see that trend. Is it going to hold? Not when they replace Biden with Kamala Harris. I think that the Republicans will now have a different question on the table and how they're going to approach Black interests to see if they can maintain that looking away from the Democrats coming toward the Republicans. If they stay on this, it's all about criminal justice reform and giving money to HBCUs, it might not work, considering that 95% of Black students don't go to HBCUs, as well as that we have more young African-American males 18 to 24 in college than we have in jail. So they're not that interested in your ideas of, letting criminals loose. So we shall see how the narrative goes when we get that new opportunity for Kamala to be sitting in that seat for the Dems.
Well, one of the reasons I love to have you on is so you can educate me, because I just hide here in my bunker and do shows, bring on high profile guests like you and let you tell America what's going on. But you are in the Beltway, you have your feet on the ground, your ear to the grindstone, or is it your nose to the grindstone? I forgot which one that is, but you get to talk to people and find out from real people what's going on. So I need you to educate me. Here's the thing I don't quite understand. The one thing that we always had as a problem with Blacks and Republicans, there was no way to prove we'd do any better than the Democrats would until Donald Trump came along. We had 4 years of Donald Trump. Now, I had a bunch of all my college friends, my Black friends from college that no longer speak to me. They're all college educated, right? They're all in business. They're all in the working class or middle class, upper middle class. And their 401ks went up when Trump was president, and their standard of living went up. So he showed Black America what it would be like if he's president. Now they've seen what it's like back again on that Democratic plantation. Why should this even be in doubt?
Well, that's a bigger question about why are the elections close? And that's what I think a lot of us are trying to assess. And it really has nothing to do with being on the ground, even though you're absolutely right. I work here in Washington, D.C., so I may hear things that others might not get, even on their evening news, since that's so selective. But we're also a policy institute, so we do a lot of data dive into the realities in this particular community. In fact, we just completed our survey, if you will, our data dive on Black behaviors and voting patterns, their attitudes toward different issues in life. One of the reasons that Blacks still will vote against their economic interests and or their personal values is because they believe the country is not fair. It's really fascinating to get into, and perhaps we should do a lot more study and a lot more conversation in town halls on why there's this insistence that life is not fair in America. Could it be maybe because for the last 60 years, that's the message that Democrats have sold, that racism's still alive and thriving, and therefore you should always be afraid that somebody can stop your opportunities? The Republicans for years didn't have an answer for this and didn't even challenge that premise. So now it's metastasized. It's deep into Black community that the country is not fair, that it will not, that if the opportunities stand in front of them, that someone else will get that opportunity unless there's a big hand of government. It's really fascinating to see some of this data that came into our report. And we actually have much of it in the tome that's just being released, The State of Black Progress, to see when the question is asked, are you a have or have not? Overwhelming numbers of blacks say that they're have-nots, even though they grew up in a great middle class. As you're pointing out, your friends are college educated, they have 401ks, they're doing just fine, America's working for them, but they still want to categorize themselves in the have-not. And what was really telling for us is how many, in comparison to the Latino community, said they're have-nots. That number was almost equal. But when it asked the question, when we asked and when data asked the question, how about in the future, will you have? The record numbers of blacks that say no, it's just telling. It's fascinating. There's just something in our psyche that has embedded that the country is just stacked against our reality. And I say our reality because most African Americans are in the middle class or higher. Under the tax policy, you brought up Donald Trump. When he signed into law the tax bill in 2017, by 2019, we saw more black people making over $75,000 a year than make under $25,000 a year. His policies were very successful when you deregulate and you bring down taxes, but yet you will still hear, as you're saying, your friends tell you that it ain't working for us. And it's rooted in a lie. And what we need are more to say life does work for us and stop pretending that the few that are successful are against the reality. That they're successful, that this is an anomaly. It's not. We know that it's not. We can go anywhere and see middle class and upper middle class African American. You can just get on an airplane now and see 5'7" sitting in the first class.
Well, you know what they did? The left somehow sold this. And biblically, you're supposed to take your portion and you're not supposed to envy. But I think what the left did when Donald Trump came in, they sold, you got a bump up. But you ain't rich. You're not making money like the white man makes money. I don't have my million. It's almost like they said they didn't look and say, gee, your salary may have doubled, may have tripled. You may have moved into a higher income bracket and had your taxes brought down. No, they're saying still the rich are still this, that, and the other thing, and tried to make you envious of the fact that, well, he didn't make you rich. Well, that wasn't what he said. What he said he was going to do is give you an opportunity, open up the businesses and the avenues for you to start your own business, right?
I think that spirit of envy that you're pointing to is a reality of Democrats. This is what the progressives do. They're a bunch of pagan progressives. They want socialism. They're after private property everywhere that it is. So therefore, they're never going to message out what you just said. In fact, when George Gilder argued in the Israel test, he asked that question. When you see the wealthy, do you envy or do you emulate? And what we need are more African Americans emulating. And the only way that we're going to get that reality into the hearts and minds of younger Black people is if we get educational choice in every community. What we need now are in our poorer communities, money to be able to follow children to schools that parents want. Because when you're overwhelmed and indoctrinated with a worldview that the cards are stacked against you, that there's always going to be an oppressor, these are the same things that they teach in the schools of the Palestinians. That's why they can live on a beachfront property and do nothing but allow for their terrorist elected officials to build tunnels. When you're constantly thinking that there's an oppressor and that is your biggest fear and that is your biggest concern and that is your biggest worry, so that means that it has to consume all of your time, then you're not going to spend time saying, how do I emulate the principles? It's interesting. I said that we are the alternative to the Urban League with this tome that we bring out now every year, The State of Black Progress, but we're also the antithesis of BLM, Black Lives Matters, as an organization, Cure Policy. So during that summer, the last time you said that we talked, 2020, the so-called Summer of Love, we actually ran billboards in these hard neighborhoods because we knew that the people were afraid and that everything in their community is broken, from family life to community life to education life to their economic lives because of liberal policies. Democrats control these communities. And they have an iron fist in that control. Nobody escapes unless you totally move out of that particular community. So we ran billboards. Tired of poverty? Then here's the success sequence. You really want to emulate those that are broken free? There are some principles that you can do. Finish school, take any job, get married, save and invest, give back to your community. We had a little Proverbs in the corner, Proverbs 10:4. We had our website so that we can give them more information if they wanted it. And Black Lives Matters went to the billboard company and demanded that they take those boards down. They said, take them down or we'll burn them down. And of course, the billboard company, like many of the businesses during the 2020 George Floyd Summer of Love, just bowed down to everything that the Black Lives Matter said that they better do. And they took our boards down. So to your point, people are not getting the information that they need to be able to break free individually from this spirit of envy and get to their full potential by emulating those that they see that are successful.
Okay. Star, since you brought up Black Lives Matter, maybe you can address this. Are more Blacks starting to catch on like, gee, why doesn't Black Lives Matter go to Chicago and tell Blacks to stop shooting each other? Gee, you have the gang problem, you have the drug problem, you have the crime problem. Why doesn't Black Lives Matter go into the neighborhoods? And I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm trying to keep this serious and try and supposedly help Black lives to matter.
Because that's not their role. The same way the teachers union said that their role is not about children. This is not their role. Their role is to keep the country divided so they can prove or try to prove that it's systematically and systemically racist so that they can overhaul it and turn it into some type of utopian communist state. That is not their role. They pay the people in those communities $25 an hour to march with them. They pay them $35 an hour if they'll put on the T-shirt. People that are hungry, people that are afraid, people that don't know what their existence is going to look like because everything in their community is controlled by government. Their families are broken and their communities are full of crime. So they get that extra little money, they're going to do it, and it's cash money. So that means they don't have to report it to their social workers. So if your question is Black Lives Matter going to change its messaging to become a vehicle of truth? No. Are you kidding?
I was being facetious.
I know you are, but you know
right.
the answer to that question. That is not what they're going to do. So what's imperative, what needs to be done is the antithesis, the opposite of Black Lives Matters, which is the church community. The third of African Americans who say that they believe in God, they're evangelicals. They need to rise up and they need to be the ones to go into these communities and let them know that life is freedom. Life is fair. Life has you in mind, and you can do better than your current state.
Yeah, well, I know you have been going into churches for a long time, especially a lot of the Black churches, because a lot of those churches and their pastors, they bring all kind of Democrats up. They support the Democratic Party. Every time we see Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or somebody, Bill Clinton at a church, it's a Black church with some Black pastor. I'd love to rip the robe off of them. That's another story. But
well,
so I know
that's why we at Cure, that's why I developed out a clergy program.
I know.
And we have
been running you out of there.
We've had well, it doesn't matter. We have over we've had over 600 pastors come through our training program. No, not all of Blacks are alike. And this is one of the things that I think society needs to recognize, the broader part of society, that there are 20% of African Americans that tell pollsters that they're conservatives, 30% that say that they're evangelicals. So rather than look at the 10, 15% that say that they're liberals and the 1% that say they're progressives, we should look at and mobilize those that are on the side of truth and get the truth to them. Let them know what the reality is of the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, the difference between the two before they go into that voting booth. This is an area where Republicans haven't spent much interest, haven't spent much time, but under Donald Trump, they began to. And more importantly than because of Donald Trump, it's because the numbers are so close. Our society is broken down in half right now. And if there's nothing else coherent that Joe Biden has said, he told us this election is about the soul of America. And it's true. We are deciding, are we going to be biblical and free, or are we going to be secular and status? And what we have to do as Black people is decide that for ourselves. Do we want biblical truth and freedom and opportunity, or do we want secularism? Anybody gets to do anything they want to do, anytime they want to do it, and the government, the nanny state, will pay for any natural consequences, including kill off your offspring in record numbers. This is what's at stake. So will Blacks see this? We're still working on that. And will they respond to truth? Perhaps so. Will Republicans continue to try to get these messages into these communities? That question's still on the table, especially as we're starting to see that it will be Kamala Harris that Donald Trump is running against.
Yeah, well, I hear you now. A friend of mine Vince Everett Ellison, who's a friend of mine who's been on the show several times, he thinks it's going to change among the blacks this time because of the puberty blockers for boys and these sex changes for kids. He's saying that a lot of blacks that's the dividing line, that
For many,
they're not going to go for this.
well, you know what? It's interesting, his philosophy and thinking. We are now segmented into one issue voters. And so if you can get a voter and what their primary concern is, people vote their concerns, not their comfort. So what is your concern? And we label that and we show them the difference between the two. He's absolutely right. But when you start broadening it out to whether it's just the economy in general and or inflation in general and or even illegal immigration in general, we can get a little bit lost. We need to get in the weeds on this one. We need to find those voters that say, I am very concerned about what they're teaching my children in school. Have you seen this? The pandemic was one of the best things that could have happened to us, to open up that door of that schoolhouse to see exactly what they've been doing to our children. Those that are interested in tax policy, we need to be there. There are one issue voters on abortion alone. Just exposing what the left does through abortion would get them into the polls, et cetera, et cetera. So there are many, many issues that are kitchen table issues. So the best way to strategize down to those few that can change their mind and may change their mind is to target the issue that's most important to them.
I hear you. Now, my issue, as you know, for a long time, my issue is fighting the Marxist communist takeover of America. So basically, I tell people now, hey, look, God's doing us a favor. He's eliminating the middle ground. He's getting the lukewarm that Jesus talks about out of there, spitting lukewarm out of their mouth. I'm spitting all you lukewarms out. You're going to have a choice. Constitution and Constitution over here, Constitution, communism. Choose. And there's going to be no middle ground. In other words, the moderates on both sides, they're going to have to go to one side because, as you can see, they're being pulled completely to the left, or you're going to go constitutional conservative Christian. There's going to be no middle ground. That's why there won't be a Robert Kennedy or anybody else in there to try and muddle the water and give you a third choice.
You're talking about on the presidential level,
On
but
the
there are
presidential
many
level.
Americans, and this is what the case that Nikki Haley was trying to make to Donald Trump, and I think is still making, is that we must also consider the concerns of those that are in our suburban communities and or that consider themselves independent, because they will go into the voting booth, but they'll vote for their state issues. They might not vote for the presidential. And when you think about red policies in different states across the country, those states are doing very, very well. So people can still disconnect from the national, if you will. So it is important for us to help them also understand how the national law does influence the decisions that are being made at the state level and the courts themselves. So it is important that we still get dialogue out to them. It's just not a natural to say, well, the alternative is worse, so they're going to vote for the red team. That's not what happened in Michigan. We can look all day for those that were the cheating, and there was a lot of misinformation and cheating going on in a variety of states. But when you get down into the weeds of what happened in some of these areas, people did not vote at the top of the ticket, but they voted down ballot. And that's why we started to see, and still see where one candidate would get overwhelming vote and another candidate right up under him in the same party didn't do as well, and vice versa. So the concern is to make sure that our messaging is clear and wholesome, and that people understand that when they go in the voting booth, they're not just voting for their local issues and or their state issues. They are voting for worldview. At the top of the ticket now is what kind of country are we going to be? And the federal government does influence every decision in every state all across this country now. So it is important that they choose, as you're saying, between the red team and the blue team, the left from the right.
I hear you, Star. And here's the one thing that scares me. So please address this to Black Americans, because every place I go, I'm hearing this. There's a disconnect between people who have seen the light and want to support Donald Trump and old-time civil rights movement, or from back in the day, blacks who basically disowned them as family members. And it just seems to be a chasm that a lot of the younger people, as you say, get it. But a lot of the older people, it's just about the D or whatever, and families are being split up. Families are being disowned. I've talked to 3 people in the last week or 2 that their relatives and friends don't even talk to them anymore. That includes me, by the way. How do you tell them to deal with this? Because they want to do the right thing, but they're really being ostracized by all their Black friends and family.
The beautiful thing about our country is that the voting booth is a private booth. They don't have to tell their family. They need to make the decision as an individual what matters most to them and their legacy, their grandchildren, their great grandchildren. There's not an expectation to get those that experience civil rights, Jim Crow, to vote against those interests. Government was there for them. It's no need of us trying to pretend it wasn't. There's no need of us trying to talk them out of what they want to do from that era. But that group is older now. Are they aggressive? We just saw them. Congressional Black Caucus is alive and well, and they're aggressive. But that younger generation, that Gen X, that Gen Y, that Gen Z, some of the Gen Zs now are of voting age, have not experienced these things. So if we're open and honest as a red team, if we're open and honest about the opportunities that this country has, but how our country is rooted in responsibility and merit, we may win some. If we're dishonest, if we try to maneuver things around, this is a people that have bought into collectivism. They're not going to diss their own to be in the party that's still flying Confederate flags. So the reality is the voting booth is a private booth. So the real I guess work you can say to get the voting proper toward what's best for this country in terms of freedom, opportunity, and truth is to let people know that your values are yours and you can go into that voting booth and vote for truth.
I hear you, but the problem we have now, politics has become, and this is going to get really down and dirty these next 4 months. And the problem is, it's hard to stay quiet. For instance, if you're at a barbecue, or if you're, after church and you're standing out with some people. I remember this happened the last time I was with one of my best friends. I went up to their house. This was when John McCain was running for president, and Sarah Palin that came on the TV. They cursed her. See, now, if I let that go, they're going to think, and that's the problem we have now. Everybody that cursing Trump, everybody that's saying this, that, and the other thing. And if you don't join in, they're going to go, oh, you're with him? See, so it's almost like it's impossible to get to the voting booth without people knowing what you. I had a woman many years ago with George Bush, and I told you this story before. She was a beautiful 70-year-old Black woman saying, Gary, I'm from North Carolina. My sons would hang me if they knew I'd vote for George Bush. I just have to keep my mouth shut and, keep my head down. Now, you can't do that anymore, right? Because when people are talking, they ask, what do you think?
I don't know that I agree with you.
Okay.
I think that what people should do is just read Esther. No, there's a time to speak. There's a time not to. Of course, that's not necessary. That's in the Ecclesiastes. But there is a time. And what the story of Esther teaches us is to wait for that moment. And when that moment occurs, now it's time. This is the moment you were born into. And the voting booth is private. If you're looking at the future of the country for your children and your grandchildren, you may want to vote against your grandmother. And yet you might not need to tell your grandmother. So I don't know that. In fact, I know I don't get into discussions with the people that I know who hold different views from me. If I want to maintain a friendship with them, which I have very, very few progressive friends. In fact, I don't think I have any progressive friends, even though I do have liberals.
I mean, Democratic friends.
I have a lot of Democrat friends because
I have none anymore.
They go to church with me. They're friends of mine. They're really deep 30 and 40-year friends. But the reason that we're able to maintain that friendship is because our political views are only one part of our lives. So we find other things to talk about. I have one in particular, she tries to bring it up all the time, but why would I engage someone that I can't change their mind? And they're not going to change mine. So I'd rather talk about other things.
There you go. Star, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Before you tell people how they can get in touch with you, tell them about the State of Black Progress and how they can get it and what they will read if they open the pages.
Well, it is a tome, and some major policy thinkers are in there on issues like Steve Moore on Social Security. We have Leslie Heiner, and oh my goodness, Ian Rowe on education policy, Sally Pipes and Grace Marie Turner on health policy. So we're looking specifically at policy in this tome, what we should be doing instead of what we've done in these areas with government. Housing policy, Ed Pinto looks at that, as well as Howard Husak, an amazing scholar who wrote the book, The Poor Side of Town and Why We Need It. So we've compiled essays from all of these authors. Dr. Bill Allen looks at government and courts, and so does Janice Rogers Brown. So it's a good way for people to get a deeper understanding in thought behind policies so that they can bring that into the discussion when they're talking to their family and friends. And instead of talking about personalities, let's talk about the policies and those differences in the two parties. And let's maybe vote for the principles of the party that really wants freedom. Oh,
Right.
and then you said it. Oh, and how to get it? You got to go to wherever you get your books, Amazon or wherever people get their books, because it is a tome on the marketplace. So you have to go purchase it, and then they can come to curepolicy.org, curepolicy.org if they want to help our nonprofit.
Hey, Star, it's been a pleasure talking to you again. Keep up the good fight. Don't let them grind you down. And
Your friends grind you down. You sound like you got more issues than I.
my issues. We all have issues. I just because I voice my issues. You
voice them, so you want to get a fight with. You know what I do, especially with my girlfriend. They bring up Donald Trump. I say, oh, do you like this handbag? Why don't we go shopping?
Yeah, so I don't have any friends that are Democrats anymore. They're all gone. I didn't dump them. See, I started to lose friends when I got born again, a true follower of Jesus.
That'll hurt you.
And then but see, Republican, it didn't do it. They hang around, but it's Donald Trump. It's the America First. It's the Constitution, and it's. Yeah. They claimed, and unfortunately, too many of my friends. I don't know if this is happening with yours. When you tell them the values, and this is scary, I've had several that I told them the difference in the values, and I got these two answers. One said, well, I didn't know it, but I guess I am a socialist. And the other said, I'd rather live in a communist country than have a racist president like Donald Trump. That's for damn sure. So my friends, when I try and tell them the truth, they say, well, I guess I'm a communist.
Well, I would like for them to read This State of Black Progress. Even if they want to keep their views, let's get the truth. So many atheists got saved by reading the Bible.
Amen.
If you don't believe in God's existence, if you don't believe in the realities and difference between different policies and how they impact your life, if you can't look in your own bank account now and see the difference between what Donald Trump did and what Biden did, maybe they should be a socialist, but let them decide with truth. So that's what I would do, is just tell them, hey, look, why don't you just make sure that you have full information before you make a decision that will hurt you and your grandchildren for the rest of your lives.
Hey, look, I told a couple of them, since you don't like the increase you got from Donald Trump, you want to give me that increase you got from your 401k? I'm still waiting for it.
Send it over it got wiped away, most of it under the Biden administration's policies anyway, but on their way back, just send a check to you.
Right. So my friend and my sister, keep up the great fight, and thanks for coming on.
You're so welcome, and I look forward to being back with you. And let's not take 4 years this next time.
No, well, I'm finally on video, and it's we'll get you back.
Okay. Thanks.
Star Parker, everybody, there you have it. I want to thank Star Parker for coming back and giving us a progress report on the state of Black America. It's 90% voting Democrat. This has to stop, and we're hoping that this will be the election. She brought up a very good point. We're at a point right now where there's no need fighting with people. Just if you can't change somebody's opinion, if you know they're locked into how they think, just keep your thoughts to yourself, to that particular person, move on, and when you get into the voting booth, vote for Donald Trump. So thank you very much, Star, for who you are and what you do. Keep up the good fight, and don't let them grind you down. Podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Hope you subscribe to it, leave a rating, a review, and the video version you can find at YouTube, Rumble, and Conservative Television of America. There's a podcast archive that you can find at radioinfluence.com. The podcast archive has more than 175 high-profile guests who've been on this show. Here are just a few: Morgan Brittany, Ben Carson, Sheriff David Clark, Kevin Sorbo, Vince Everett Ellison, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Rebecca Friedrichs, Lucretia Hughes, Carrie Lake, Kira Davis, Judge Janine Pirro, Mike Lindell, Monica Crowley, Brandon Tatum, Wayne Allen Root, Carol Swain, and Naomi Wolf. Just a few of the many that have been on this show. And what they had to say back then is just as valid today. Well, that's it for now, everyone. So thanks for joining us, and hope you'll check out the next episode. And until then, this is your host, Gary Benford, saying God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America.